accountability, and country ownership. Prior to her turn at USAID, Ms. Nylander assumed senior community engagement roles at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and Program and Policy Development at the Community Oriented Policing Service at the U.S. Department of Justice. Ms. Nylander is also the former Director of Partnerships and Resource Development at the National Association of Consumer Advocates, the nation's leading consumer advocacy organization. In this capacity, she oversaw the Institute for Foreclosure Legal Assistance and $15 million foreclosure defense project, which provided legal representation to families facing foreclosure due to abusive subprime mortgages. So Ms. Nylander is the former commissioner of the DC Mayor's Office on African Affairs and is a founding board member of Trade Plus Impact, a global supporting African female entrepreneurs in craft and natural cosmetics sector. She has gained her Bachelor's of Law at the University of London and has a Master's in International and Comparative Law from George Washington University Law School, and is a 2018 Fellow of the International Career Advancement Program, sponsored by Joseph Cobble International. So, hi, Miss Lydia. If you're here, kindly be our guest. We are so happy. We are so happy to be here, and we are thrilled to have you. Please join us. And yeah, thank you so much. All of us, let's just welcome Miss Lydia. Let's just welcome Miss Lydia. Hello, Miss Lydia.
Thank you, Ms. Adi. Thank you, Guy. Thank you to everybody here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody around the world. I really appreciate you taking the time just to hear a little bit from me. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I do appreciate it. And I'm so glad to hear that your past week has been so productive, and looking forward to all of the amazing magic that you are going to do with your next couple of days and moving into the future. So, as stated, my name is Lydia Nylander, and that was a very long preamble about what I do for a living and the journey that's taken me to this point. I'll say that I am a daughter of Sierra Leonean parents. I grew up in the UK as a first generation member of that area. I grew up in London. I went to school in London, and I do consider myself sort of a global ambassador of sorts. Every place I go in the world, I never meet a stranger. I always feel at home, and I think it's because of that shared commonality that I find in our experiences. So with that said, and with that sort of pre-setting, I'm going to talk a little bit about risk, reward, and equity in this current time. And I'm just going to share my screen, and I hope everybody can see that. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So, as stated, I'm a risk advisor, and I would charge that you are too. The world is inherently a risky place. And so understanding risks and understanding how we address them, how we respond to them, is something that is not just a technical expertise, but is also sort of a life skill. And that has become so apparent in our current climate, in our current situation with COVID-19. So we're going to talk a little bit about this current situation we're in. We're going to talk a little bit about the things that I have in my toolbox and the approaches that I take in looking at risks from an agency and a critical risk perspective. And then I'm going to turn it over to you to put on your risk expert hat and come up with some key critical risks that you see related to a peaceful and just world. So that's the story we're on right now. Okay. So I would be remiss if we didn't take a moment of reflection at our current situation. We are living in a very uncertain time, and for many of us, a very sad, a very frightening time. We have a global pandemic with no cure. We have its effect on a global supply chain, which is rippling across the world. It has affected our financial markets. It's affected our manufacturing chains. It has affected people's health. We are dealing with all of the interrelatedness of risk and the velocities of risk. So how fast and how significant risks have become and the impact that those risks have had on our current living situation and what will happen in the future. And so many people are calling this the Great Pause. It is a moment of pause and reflection for the world, and hopefully a charge for us to think critically about how we can move forward and create the type of world that will be responsive to the type of critical risks that we now see as evident, but also just and equitable. I think that the UN has talked about a new social contract and the promise that that could bring. And I think that these are all guiding principles as we start to think about the next weeks, months, and years ahead. So I've talked about risk and I've talked about what I do for a living, which is assess risks to our key objectives and operations. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out something about risks to you. And if you take nothing away from this presentation, please take this away. Risk's definition is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. So essentially what you're trying to do is analyze what the uncertainty of a series of scenarios is having on what you want to achieve in a given moment. And the reason that this definition is so important and why it resonates to me is because risks do present an opportunity for positive change and negative change. And we've been so used to being guided by risks being negative that we haven't necessarily been able to kind of look at what the silver lining may be, or look at where a positive outcome may be underneath the surface. And so to Guy's point earlier, you know, obviously you are the UNESCO Center for Peace, and your summer summit is usually takes place in together. You're all together in person, and you're building and forging those relationships. But what technology allows, and what COVID has caused, is a connection virtually that for some is easier. Some people who maybe wouldn't have been able to fly or come here or come to the US are now able to participate virtually. So that's a positive. That was a positive outcome of the potential negative downstream effects of COVID. So just kind of level setting, I think it's important to address risk in that way. Now, risks related to COVID-19. We've talked a little bit about what those might look like from a health perspective, from a human capital perspective, what that relationship has had related to work and telework. And what you're seeing is the world adapting in real time. You're seeing people find new innovative ways to develop or share services or products. One very sort of noticeable avenue that I've seen is that many restaurants or many areas that sort of depending on foot traffic of people coming and going, have found really creative ways to bring that experience to you at your home, whether that's delivery, services, or other types of ways to keep you connected and keep them connected to their business base or their customer base, but also stay in business. And so when you think about risks, it's very important to think about how businesses, how organizations, how governments, how all of these different organizations and ecosystems need to pivot and adapt to the current situation, a situation that is changing all the time. So I've already explained to you the type of work that I do. That can take me all around the world, and it has. I think the only person who's been to more countries than myself is probably Guy. But this is what I do when I go to different countries and I'm looking, and we, as a development partner, are looking at ways that we can help the education system or provide infrastructure to wash and sanitation projects, or help health supply chains. We look and we focus on these 7 steps. So any tool, any risk management expert has their tools, has their arsenal, their toolkit. So these 7 steps are essential in understanding the environment and understanding how to move forward, not only looking at the positive, but the negative related to risks. So step 1, you need to establish the context. Know where you are, know the enabling environment, and know where you want to go. So the idea of understanding what your objectives are critical. The second step is identifying those risks, positive and negative, providing an analysis of that environment to understand, related to the risk that you have, how you would like to move forward. Then you need to analyze and evaluate those risks based on maybe costs or performance. Obviously, low risks maybe don't need as much attention as high and critical risks. So there's a prioritization that you need to do that will help you figure out how to move forward. And that leads you to the 4th step, which is developing alternatives, playing different scenarios in your mind to figure out, okay, if I have a risk, both positive and negative, what are the scenarios that I need to deploy in order to understand how to manage and monitor that risk? Once you have all of those scenarios, you move to step 5, which is then responding to those risks. And risk response is critical. It helps you be able to make the best decisions and allocate resources and thought and energy, and sometimes money, to addressing these risks so they either maximize what you want to do or minimize any negative outcome or any reputational issues that you may have moving forward. Step 6 is just good, firm project management 101, monitoring your progress and reviewing what's happening, and ensuring that you are keeping track of what may be key critical negative risks moving forward. And then step 7 is about this constant quest for to communicate and learn, constantly adapting as you go, constantly perfecting what you know about your environment, about your objectives, and about how you want to be effective, both in life, in projects. These 7 steps have applicability across the board. So when you think about risk response options that I was talking about a little earlier, these opportunities and threats really look at sort of what you really need to understand in order to maximize and minimize the risks that you find. Maximize, obviously, on the opportunity side of the scale, minimize related to threats. So this graphic really shows you, you know, essentially what are the feelings or what are the issues that percolate up as you start to do those types of analyses. Is it the uncertainty of the environment? Are those uncertainties so grave that you really just need to avoid the situation altogether? Or are there so many opportunities and green shoots and is it the type of environment that I don't like the word exploit, but are there ways that you can maximize your impact here? Exposure. So exposure is, essentially asking you to sort of, are you willing to sort of take that hand with someone else and walk into a partnership, into a collaboration? Do you want to enhance those things, or do you want to put in some barriers or some prerequisites before you continue? Ownership. Do you want to own this initiative? Or do you want to transfer that ownership to shield you from potential downside risks? And then baseline, where are you? Where are you? And do you want to sort of accept where you are and accept the risks that may present themselves? Or are you okay sort of just knowing that low risks might be there, but kind of moving forward anyway? And that's what that ignore arrow is referencing. So when you think about risk response, it's really about thinking about being smart. And that's looking at sort of specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-related risk response. And so this is really important because essentially you want to make sure that whatever risk responses that you have are adequate and commensurate to the types of risks that you're finding. If something is going to cost millions and millions of dollars to bring to from a high risk to a medium risk, that might not be worth your time. It might not be feasible. So thinking through what risk response looks like and how to do it effectively is important. Another point I will say here is that risk response is really about multiple partners working in a consultative or collaborative way. But it also requires ownership and it requires leadership. It requires constant focus and it requires the type of considerations that I see happening all over the world. And the reason that these bullets mean so much to me is because they really get to the root cause or the secondary system symptoms of many of our key issues and key global challenges. And so at this point, what I would say is that the work that I do around the world has never been more critical than right now. And what I'm finding is that the same level of consideration that I have when I'm thinking or advising on, wash and sanitation projects, as I was saying, or projects to do with climate change, is that we are in a situation where global challenges really require us to think in big, bold terms and not just address just a secondary symptom, but really address the root causes of some of our global challenges. And that has never been more acute than what we are seeing now, with a global call to action related to the protests around climate change, around racial injustice, around democracy and human rights around the world. The same risks, both opportunities and threats, are really being magnified on a global scale. And so, as you reflect on your time in this last week and the coming week that you have, when you think about the challenges that you have in your countries, risk management is a fantastic way to come up with real concrete solutions that are stress tested, that have an analysis and thought behind them, but have such great global impact. And so I mean it when I say that you are all risk experts because you have the knowledge, you have the conviction, and you have the passion to really address some of the global challenges that we are currently facing, and come up with the types of solutions that really will mean a peaceful, equitable, and just world for all of us. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions before I set you a little assignment.
Okay, Lydia, I'll be the first. I'll take. When I saw the 7 steps, I couldn't help but go back a couple of tens of thousands of years about ancestors.
Yes.
Right? And I'm sure they didn't have a well illustrated step like this, but for us to be here today, I guess they might have really run through that list very effectively. And
absolutely, absolutely. When you think about when you think about every movement that has changed the course of history, when you think about the civil rights movement, when you think about the suffragettes movement, when you think about the current global climate change movement, those movements established the context. They were able to identify the current situation and articulate and amplify that for the world. And then they've shown us the risks, both positive and negative, of all types of solutions, all types of pathways. And they've developed alternatives. Climate change being one of them. I think that, we are seeing the capacity of science and of innovation and creativity to come up with real global solutions to some of the big climate change issues. And I think that being able to adapt and learn, when you think about the ancestors and their stories and many of their passages from different regions of the world in bondage, adapting and learning and responding to the changing and sometimes violent environments was just a way of life. So these 7 steps are not, they're sort of a life code.
Yeah.
They help you assess how to move forward with the information that you have and make the best calculated decisions that you can make. And so, yes, absolutely, Guy.
Thank you.
Amazing observation.
Okay, delegates.
I have a question.
Introduce yourself again. Introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mahdir. I'm from Iran and I'm 16. I'm very risky in my life, but I have a question. Sometimes when we want to do a risk, it's 50-50. So what should we do in this position?
50-50. I like that.
so if and thank you so much for your question. It's a great one. So I think if I characterize it correctly, it's just there's kind of the same amount of upside than downside, and you just have to decide which is the best way to go, whether it's left or right.
Exactly.
It's a very, very good question. I think, again, the question that always comes to mind when I'm in my work and in my personal life is, where do I want to go? Where do I want to go? And what is the environment? So for me, oftentimes, I'm going to give you an example. I'm learning Kiswahili. And learning a language as an adult is obviously more difficult than being a child. we learn differently. But one of the things I've noticed is that for me, it's very important to understand the cultural fabric of why, the, why certain words are written the way they are, why they're said the way they are, what they mean. And so, for me, I could sit in a class and do things online and just quickly sort of pick up the language without the cultural context. But instead, I've decided to take a slower, more thoughtful road. I have an online teacher who, we sit and half the class is, my vocabulary and making sure I understand the verb tenses and everything. And then the other half of the class is her sharing much of her history and sharing the significance of what I'm learning. And so for me, if I wanted to sort of get to the finish line very quickly and just tick off that I understood Kiswahili, I would have just gone with the fastest, most expedited road. But for me, there's another element that means that a slower, more considered pace is what's going to work for me. And so I think that being very clear about what your objectives are is important. And the scenario planning of being able to kind of assess where different decisions may take you is also something that is worth thinking about. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah,
Actually,
thank you.
Just on his question again, he started by this assessment. He likes risk.
Right.
It's amazing to see a 16-year-old boy saying he likes risk. But at the same time, we know there are people that like adrenaline. So in your observation on a personal note, not at structural level, is there a way to link risk takers and success or something? Is there a correlation?
That's a really good question, Guy. There is a correlation. There appears to be a trend where people who have a natural proclivity to positivity and are less risk adverse tend to take the types of risk that maximize the positive outcomes. So as I was saying, risk is both positive and negative. So people who have that sort of sunny disposition about life tend to be able to take that disposition and maximize positivity in the risk space. Conversely, people who are risk adverse tend to be able to identify the type of risk mitigation measures that help minimize the level of negative exposure that people have in objectives and in any type of endeavor. So no matter where you are in the risk spectrum, you have a part to play, is what I'm saying. But I would definitely say that our risk takers are helpful, and they tend to be very helpful in the innovation, creativity, and business space.
Okay, I hope the delegates are listening anyway. I think this is very important. Thank you. And someone just posed a question. Okay, yeah.
If I just may say something, the last delegate that made a question, his name is Magdiyar. He's one of my delegates. Okay. He's in Lebanon right now, so that means that it is close to 1 a.m. where he is, and he is connected to the conference. Okay. So I do think that is worth pointing out.
Yes. So ask the question.
No, he already made it. The last one that participated.
There's one question that just came in, and I saw. Can someone read that, or the person I saw in the chat?
Yeah, Luisa, you may open your microphone and share with us your question.
Can I read the question?
Lydia
go ahead.
already answered it when Guy asked it about again. Then she made a comment. It just took too long to type, I think. it was about like considering the consequences of the downsides, and then seeing if you can handle these consequences. So like you take the risk, even knowing like you can fail, because you know you can handle the consequences if you fail, and then try adapting from that. Because like even if the odds are against you, like if the odds are bad, you should still take the risk and then adapt. I think that's it.
Was that a question or just? Okay, I think what they're saying is that maybe by answering my question, you also answer their question. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So yes, so you very much answered her question by when you answering my question. Okay, next one. Mm-hmm.
Delegates, would any other of you would like to make a question? I hope I'm saying your name right, Marcia from Iran.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for. Hi, Mr. Yi.
Hello.
Thank you so much. How are
You're not sleeping, huh?
Yes, I was so tired, but I was invited to this this meeting by Rosha. So I came and saw that it's very interesting. So I stayed. And thank you for holding this very fantastic and impressive conference, first of all.
You're welcome.
And yes, wish you the best. Cheer up. And thank you for good presentation. I don't know, sorry, the name, because
Lydia.
I came in the, yes, because I joined in the middle of the meeting. Yes, and sorry for my tiredness. I want to ask about the risk, because I myself sometimes take risk, especially in doing something that is against the policy and view of all the community and other people. And in this way, I don't have any fear when I do that. And sometimes I know that I may face some problems, or I can be hurt, but I don't know what is inside me that I do that. But in other cases, I don't have this feeling, and I don't have this risk to take. I want to know that is there any deep reason for that, or is it related to my interest, or is it related to my belief? For example, one of them is, for example, for making students attending conferences or doing something that I know that is very good, but I know that I'm aware of being in danger, but I will do that. So I want to know that what is inside me for doing this, and is there any conflict between these two things? I cannot do in my personal things like this. For example, if there is invest, or for example, something for economy, I don't take risks at all. But I don't know why. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for this question. I'll try and characterize it. Are you, would I be right in saying that in some situations you like taking risks, or you're very sort of risk, you're pro risk?
I'll help her a little bit, because I know her personally.
Oh, okay. You know this.
Yes. Of course, you know, she's in Iran right now. She's at 1 a.m. in the morning, and she led the first delegation that brought students from Iran to the United States.
Wow.
And that was not the easiest time possible. I don't think you need me to say any more than that.
Yes.
And going back, all those things. So that's the background.
Right. Well, thank you for that. That's helpful.
Thank you.
I think that our risk tolerance, which is these terms are sort of used interchangeably, but your risk tolerance or your appetite for risk is often shaped by your personal story. It's shaped by your environment and what you see every day. And it's shaped by your convictions. And so oftentimes you will find people who appear bold and brave and fearless because they grew up in activist backgrounds, or they have seen realities of not stepping forward and not being visible and not being vocal and not advocating. And so I think that the establishment of that context, that first step related to risk management, also applies to you. You have to establish your own inner context, your own inner story, your own inner narrative. And it's almost the manifesto through which you walk through life. If people were going to ask you what you stand for, you know, most people have 5 or 6 key things that they can speak to. And I think that those things are really the lens through which people then look at risk management. I would also say that most people's risk tolerance for their own safety is different than somebody else. So, for example, what you're willing to risk in the negative sense for yourself is maybe it's maybe greater, the risks that you're willing to take for someone else, you know, maybe your family or someone close to you, or somebody that you feel is deserving of an opportunity. Maybe you're willing to go that bit further for them versus yourself. And so again, that's the context. So I would say that inner context and then the context around you is what I see shaping many people's sort of personal philosophy around risk. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much. Yes, it was very good. Thank you so much. I wish you the best. And again, thank you, Mr. Dijokan, for being very positive and energetic and having a smile and making motivation to all. I wanted to give my the message of my students to you, and I myself get it. Wish you the best, and I wish many people like you would be in the world to make very, very good impress on others. Thank you so much. And
You're
thank
welcome,
you for
yeah, we actually will live because of people like you. Okay. Knowing that it's a lot easier for me to go and speak my mind and do things than you. So we really Lydia and I, we understand and appreciate people like you very much. So thank you. You know, we have good friends here in us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy now that I could join this meeting, talk to you, and listen to this very perfect presentation and good lecturer and get my question as well. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rosh, that joined me here. Okay, have a good time.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. There was another question or someone raising the hand. Irene, you're the one monitoring, right? Yeah. Who's next?
Yes, Guy.
Okay.
I already have the link for Mrs. Lydia interview, and we are ready to go. So, Mrs. Lydia, if you allow us to have an interview with you, we will be delighted for the UNESCO Center for Peace platform. If
there's
you're
some
able
question,
to,
right? There's some
to
question.
connect.
Should I stop sharing my screen or?
Yeah, maybe so that people can see you.
Right.
In
there we go.
The big...
So
I want to see you guys. So I was.
No, I want to see that beautiful pen behind you.
So
where is it from?
Oh, this is from Thailand.
Okay, perfect, beautiful. Okay. Okay, Russia was asking a question, right? Russia.
Yeah, I think someone had a question to ask.
That was Russia, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see.
Where is she? Oh no, was Was Shura?
No,
Yeah,
we
Shura.
actually
It
have.
was Shirabi. Shirabi had a question, I think.
No, I don't have. I didn't have one. I was actually going to help Areli, but I really continue.
Okay.
Thank you, Shura. Actually, we have a delegate with a question raising his hand. He is Damola. Damola, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Areli. I'm Damola from Nigeria. I kind of joined late, but I have a question. Sometimes when I am in a team working together with people, I'm a person, I love taking risks, but I see that the others don't have the enthusiasm or the energy to take risks concerning the project. And this kind of frustrating, and I don't see us getting the desired result. So how can I change this narrative, especially when I join a team? I love taking risks, but when I join teams, sometimes I see that people have this attitude of not liking to take risks. So how can I change it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I think it's about, it's a number of things. The first is, I think effective teams, and there are lots of, information, and there's lots of research on what the composition of effective teams. But typically there's a person who's kind of that visionary. They might not necessarily know all the steps, and they might not be the person writing all the beautiful notes, but they have a goal and they want to get there. And they are that person who keeps the energy up and enthusiastic. And when times are kind of like, it's a little bit difficult to know where we're going, that person re-engages and re-energizes the space. And so it sounds to me like that might be a role that you would be really good at. And so one of the things I would say is, it's always, and again, I sounding like a broken record, but establishing the context means knowing the type of communicator you are, knowing the type of skills that you bring to a team. And sometimes before you start working on a particular task or in a particular project, stating that at the beginning and saying, these are what I think my key strengths are in a team dynamic. I'm really good at sort of problem solving and getting us to solutions and getting us on track, versus some people are just really good at making sure that you're monitoring progress and are very much about the process. And so effective teams really need all of those different dynamics together. And so try not to be frustrated. I know it can be very difficult. We've all been in teams that do not work well, and we know what that feels like. But I would take some time at the beginning, where possible, when you work on teams, to do that level setting exercise and communicate to your other team members how you best work, how you best communicate, and how you best add value to a team. And once people kind of see that in practice, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes people fall into the things that they are naturally good at. And that's when teams work so successfully. So that's just a few sort of pearls of wisdom, but I also work in teams that don't function very well. It's unfortunately, it's part of life, but there are ways to make things better. I hope I answered your question, or tried to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another hand? Is there some hands raised?
Lisa, do you have another question?
Yes, can I ask it?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. And if you open your camera, even better.
Okay. Hi. My question is a bit long.
Introduce yourself, please.
Oh, hi. I'm Lisa Bellintoni. I'm 16. I'm from Brazil. So I think that for when you're analyzing risks, the most important thing that you have to do is to ask the what if question and be curious about the different scenarios that there could be. And we had a lot of lectures during this conference that we were talking about how curiosity is important in education and everything. Do you believe that because the current educational system doesn't really incentivize this type of questions because they disturb the flow of the classes, do you believe that that's one of the reasons why people have so much trouble analyzing risks nowadays? They just like follow one straight path and don't innovate a lot?
I think your question is a very, very good one. If I had the answer to this question, I would apply it in every way, shape, or form in the work that I do and just personally. I do think that very rote ways of thinking, very traditional learning methods, and unfortunately, there hasn't been much space for experiential learning, which really forces you to think outside the box and think about scenarios and plan for such, is really causing people to really struggle with these new concepts around risks, about actually embracing risk where necessary, and looking at risks from different vantage points and not just avoiding risk altogether. And so I agree with you. I think the education of the future not only has to really adapt to the types of jobs and opportunities that we think will be available in 25 years from now, and really asking ourselves the question, are we equipping your generation and the generation behind you with the tools and abilities they need to be successful? But also, what are the risks that interweave, or risks that are interwoven, that can cause these seismic and bigger effects that you are seeing currently with COVID-19. And so that does require coming up with mitigation measures around our current global pandemic, requires a different type of thinking. So you're absolutely right there. And I think that more analysis needs to be done around how we can better equip people to own their risk management expertise and to apply it to the work and to their communities and neighborhoods and the work that they do. So very good observation.
Thank you.
You have 3 questions, 3 people.
Thank you, Luisa. Now, if you want to make a question, you may raise your hand on Zoom. We also have Magdia. Please make your question.
Yeah, sorry, I have another question, and I have a question that is, sometimes people don't risk because I think they don't have enough confidence. So what should we do to increase confidence, and after that the consequence of that is increased risk?
That's a really good question, and a question that I have to face every day at work and in initiatives that I work on. How do you get people to get unstuck and say, okay, this is worth it, we're going to move forward? I think it's I think there will always be people who are pioneers. There will always be in the history of the world, leaders have always moved forward with this. You know, some people would say it's faith, some people would say it's providence, Some people would say it's just sheer will. Many of our icons, many of the people that we admire today, move forward in life with just this conviction that things are going to work out, and that they move forward, and in their moving forward, people move with them. And so at times, the world requires you to be a leader and for people to follow you. And so I think that there's always an opportunity for you to show leadership and to exemplify that in the way that you speak to people, in the way that you talk about things that matter to you. And when you do that, people sometimes feel, there's a feeling that people have that says, I may not understand all of this, but I trust that person does. And sometimes that's all you need. So I'm sure Guy, who is a leader in our community, and sometimes moves forward in faith when I'm sure other people are telling him, no, don't move in that direction. Oh, don't do that.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat. Don't be an advocate. Don't be an activist. Just, but he has a strong conviction and always has. And I think you see that in the work he does. And you see that in the commitment that he has to all of you, year after year. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to add something to what Lydia just said. And also, Abedi, your teacher, also said the same. There comes a time where you have to make a decision, because sometimes our need, you compare your need to the need of the greater community, society as a whole, right? And I like this word of Dr. King that we all know. When he was sharing his dreams, I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but we as people, we get there. People don't actually wait that. That's very powerful. This guy is telling you, I know it's going to be better. I may die before that happens, but for that, I'm going to continue that work, right? So that's exactly what keeps some of us moving. When you realize that you cool, whatever happens, you are ready to accept it for the greater cause, right? So that's what I wanted to add, so that you understand that yes, it's a call. You are here, you could be sleeping, your fellow are sleeping, but something is telling you to be here and to talk at 2 a.m. Even I know, especially there are people in your country not even dare talk to us, just because they are so scared of what will happen, what will think. But you are here, you've been participating. So these are the kind of, I see that in you, and I'm very happy. Okay, so thank you very much for a wonderful question.
Yes, absolutely.
And also the wonderful answer. It takes two to tango. I think there was one more question, right?
Any more?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Any other question, guys? Any other question?
2, 1. Okay. So maybe you can go ahead and conclude the meeting and invite us. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I was gonna ask a couple of questions and do a little exercise, but in the interest of time, what I would say is that this is again, I mentioned that people are calling this time the great pause, and it is a moment of reflection. And I would ask you, and today or in the next couple of weeks with your time together, to think about some of the top risks. And now you know that risk have both positive and negative dimensions. To think about the top risks that you see around developing a peaceful, just, and equitable world. And then I would ask you to think about, okay, So once you've identified that risk, who is it that would need to sort of manage that? Who are the stakeholders that need to be involved? Because as I mentioned, we can't address risk unless all of the people are part of the decision-making process and are consulted. So who are those stakeholders that you would want to be part of any discussion related to those risks? And how would you manage and monitor that risk? How would you make sure you are being effective? You know, how would you ensure that the best learning and the best adaptive practices are going into addressing those critical risks? So I will leave it to Guy to figure out how I get your homework, but these are the things that we need everybody. These global challenges need everybody. And so I would be thrilled to see what you come up with and the thought and the analysis that you put into this, because again, global challenges need global attention. And, you know, as I said, all 26 of us are risk experts now. So, you know, if you didn't think you had another job, now you've got one.
So I'm going to pass over the buck. I'm very good at that. I'm picking Andre. Are you there? Andre, please unmute yourself. Yes. So Andre and Masmadi. So you are the two responsible of follow-up on this. You to make sure if you don't understand the question, make her to repeat so that you understand, the two of you clearly understand what she's asking, and you are going to get your groups, all the different committees, to actually reflect on those, okay? It's very important. Okay. Do you want her to repeat or you got it?
Yeah, can she please repeat so I write it down this time?
Sure, and I can send the slide on my presentation to you as well after this. But all the exercise is to come up with at least four top risks that you see related to a peaceful, just, and equitable world. Those risks could be opportunities or they could be threats. Mm-hmm. After you identify those up to 4 risks, how would you manage them? How would you manage those risks? How would you make who needs to be part of these discussions? Who needs to be stakeholders in terms of monitoring and making sure that these risks address, you know, whatever responses you come up with, they really address that root cause of the risk. And then how would you sort of monitor, like what would be the types of things that you would include in terms of thinking about monitoring it, you know, months, years from now? Would you use technology? How would you use technology? What type of governance structures would you create? How would you make sure that people at every level were involved in addressing this risk? These are all things that you know, people think about related to sort of global challenges. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
So can I please read the question to be sure I got it right?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So 4 top risks that you see related to a peaceful, just, and equitable world. Mm-hmm. How will you manage those risks? Who needs to be part of the discussion? Are there any stakeholders that, for example, those who need to be involved to get it done on the grassroots? How will you monitor the risks using technology, or what type of governance structure would you use? Right. Okay. Perfect. All right. So
good. So the two of you, basically, I know Mariana is so full, and there's so many the other people but do you two be responsible on making sure that each of your committees? How many committees do you have right now, Ireland?
We have 20 committees.
Okay, so I expect to have a report from each, at least one per committee. Okay, by Saturday. Okay, because I will have to send it to her. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, okay, don't blame me, blame Lydia. Don't blame me, blame her, blame the teacher.
No, I am actually very happy about this. Like a simple WhatsApp message in the chairs group. They share it with the delegates. We promote it in the ceremony, and we get the answers. So
because I do expect to at least share some of those at the closing ceremony. That's why I think we need to have that by Friday evening, so that we talk about those at the closing. Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Well, it's been wonderful to have this discussion with you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You are all fantastic. I've heard such fantastic things from Guy about this past week and this coming week. He was so excited, and it is my pleasure to have spent this hour with you. And I hope you found some of this helpful, both professionally and personally. And so thank you so much, especially those that are, it's the middle of the night or the middle of the
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Lydia. I think there's an invitation for Ireland. She received the link already. Lydia has the link, right, Ireland?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Rodrigo sent it to her.
Okay, so let's meet in the room, in the studio room in a couple of minutes. Yes? Yes. So Masmadi, myself, and Ireland, we meet in the room.
You just sent me the link. Okay, yes, I think I have a stream here. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much,
Mrs. Lydia. We'll
and
see you there.
Okay, good night. I see all of you. You guys have a meeting tonight or no?
I don't think so.
Okay,
cheers?
Perfect.
Cheers.
Cheers, no. Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Have some rest, please. I know it's been sleepless night, but please have some rest tonight, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.